Good morning and happy Tuesday, everyone. And it is a very happy Tuesday because we have regular season football to talk about. And who better to talk about it with than the guy over there looking all professional today, Greg Cosell of NFL Films and ESPN's NFL Matchup. And Greg, you're getting all your shows together. You're kind of finalizing your tape stuff and all your process, filming the matchup show, which, of course, we're all watching and DVRing and all that. So we're ready to go. We're ready to come down from 30,000 feet to boots on the ground and discuss some actual football, my friend.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. It was a good weekend of college football, and now I'm ready for the NFL.
We could do a whole show just on the quarterbacks from college football.
There'll be a lot of quarterbacks in this year's draft. It'll be interesting how that plays out over time.
Yes, very much so. And something we'll talk about later. But for now, Dr. Cosell, we've got some football to talk about where it means everything. We'll start with the season opener, Lions at Chiefs, Thursday, September 7th. And I want to start with Patrick Mahomes' improvement against a couple of concepts in the second half of the season. Because the two things, this was going to be the kryptonite and the blueprint and whatever. Too deep coverage and flooding the zones and having 3 or fewer pass rushers. And I'll put all the numbers up in the article, but to shorten it, against too deep coverage in the first half of the season, you had a passer rating of 87.2. From week 10 through the Super Bowl, 120. The 3 or fewer pass rushers and flooding the zones in the first 9 weeks of the season, 60.2 passer rating. From week 10 through the Super Bowl, 135.8. And we've talked about this a little bit before and how the Chiefs kind of made things more expansive horizontally and vertically. But as they go into this game with the Lions, to what would you attribute the way things changed for Mahomes, maybe what different pictures he saw, and just how it went differently?
I got to tell you, Doug, that's been talked about a lot, and I don't know where to go with that. I mean, he's played a lot of football. He's seen a lot of things. To me, given his career, that's not a large enough sample size, in my view, to draw any meaningful conclusion from it. It was 2 years. Remember 2 years ago in the AFC Championship game when the Bengals beat them? Mm-hmm. And in the second half, Lou Anarumo, who's one of the most overlooked, really good defensive coordinators in the league,
yes.
In the second half, he decided to go with, a 3-man rush and 8 in coverage. And everybody said, oh, my God, that was what did it. And, of course, I watched the tape, you watched the tape. And as I was watching that tape, which I watched multiple times, I thought to myself, there's no way that's the first time either Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes saw a 3-man rush and 8 in coverage. So, again, I'm not trying to cop out on an answer here. I don't know what that means. It's not a large enough sample size for me, and there's so many other variables that could come into play. In other words, what I'm trying to say is I don't think that's a Mahomes thing.
Okay.
I just don't. I mean, Mahomes is so good and so smart. Yeah, maybe they had some problems. Maybe the play designs weren't. And again, because I'm not seeing all those plays, obviously, as we're talking, nor did I know those stats as you just presented them. So it wasn't something I focused on in my film study. So I don't have, there may be an answer that I can't give you, but my guess would be that it's not because Patrick Mahomes is incapable of playing against what you just suggested. Right. There have to be other things going on beyond the fact that, Patrick Mahomes can't do that.
Right. I would say the one thing I noticed in the second half of the season, this would apply both to, the 3-man rush and the 2 deep coverage. They started to, in my mind, do a lot more just sending guys vertically, and then Kelsey was the crosser. So it wasn't like Mahomes was just taking dink and dunk underneath. They would spread out the defense and then it was Kelsey, it could have been other people, sort of those crossers. So they weren't acquiescing to the short stuff. It was more the intermediate. To me, that was kind of one difference that happened.
Yeah. And, this is a team that, contrary to what a lot of people might believe, they play a lot out of multiple tight end sets.
Led the league in 13 personnel.
Yeah. I mean, they do that a lot, and they really effectively use motion. So, I think that I think Andy Reid has always been a coach, and he's a great coach, and he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer, deservedly so. But I think Andy is always been a coach that runs his system, and now he's got the best quarterback he's ever had running his system, a quarterback that can do anything both physically and mentally. But Andy's always run it, and that's his thing. And sometimes, as we've seen over the years, even going back to his Philly days, there are always games where, hey, sometimes the defense takes that away. I even had a conversation with a defensive coordinator who said that, hey, sometimes, Andy calls his plays and, they don't work on a given day for whatever reason. And he calls his plays. He has his offense. Mm-hmm. Mahomes obviously now better than anybody can make chicken salad out of what, and so now if something doesn't work, Mahomes can make it work.
Right.
But I would just struggle with the idea that there's one way in which you can take away quote unquote Mahomes or the pass game. Right. I just don't feel like that is a large enough sample size, given that he's now been a starter 5 years. Is it 5-year starter?
I believe so.
I don't think that's you can generalize like that.
Right. I just wanted to address the alleged blueprints because I know how much we love that word.
The what? Oh yeah, the blueprint stuff. Look, every coach will tell you, as you know, in speaking with coaches, that there are certain things that they feel they can do to minimize what a great player does or a great offense does. And there are some weeks it works, and then there are other weeks which are never talked about where maybe the same approach doesn't work, but no one talks about that.
Yeah. Let's move to Detroit's offense. We discussed this a couple weeks ago, the 5 offenses that Greg is looking for. And you had the big, you binge watched a lot of Detroit's offense. So just in summary, let's go back to that and talk about what Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs defense have to deal with an offense that is really kind of underrated.
Yeah, again, I think because of the Mahomes and the offense that Steve Spagnuolo is often overlooked, but he's had an unbelievable career winning multiple Super Bowls. He's a big believer in not giving receivers free access into their routes, particularly in today's NFL with so much quick game. And we'll see how that plays out this week. We'll see how the Lions respond to that. They move receivers around an awful lot as well. Spags is there's a pretty good mix of man and zone pressures.
Right.
I would say that he doesn't pressure as much as maybe some think that he does, but he does pressure. And as I said, it's a really good combination. The big question now is, with it being clear that Chris Jones is not going to be playing Thursday night, or it certainly seems to be the case, then how does that impact how he decides to pressure? Because Chris Jones can win one-on-one, and you can align your defensive fronts so he can get one-on-one matchups. Now, it's a very good O-line in Detroit, but still, Chris Jones is a big man. Last year he aligned at D end on 434 snaps, counting both the regular and the postseason. That's a lot of snaps for a guy who's essentially a D tackle. And he won a lot of one-on-one matchups, and they did a great job with their front alignments to get him matched one-on-one. So now with him not being there, the question is, how does that change both his front alignments and his approach to pressure? We don't know the answer to that.
Right. They have Karlaftis. They have Felix.
The rookie from Kansas State.
Felix. Sorry, Felix. It could be more. Well, I mean, last year the Chiefs had a defensive EPA of minus 0.8 with Jones on the field and plus 0.5 when he was not. Defensive EPA is better when it's negative, so that kind of tells you his effect. And the thing about it, you can talk about scheming one-on-ones, you're always going to slide to him. When you see 95, that's where you got to focus.
Yeah, and that happened an awful lot, last year when I watched a ton of their defensive tape a couple of weeks ago. And when they lined up in what was basically their jet front, meaning you had 2 wide nines and essentially 2-3 techniques or 4 eyes, where, it's a pass rush front on third down, a good percentage of the time, the center slid to Jones when he was a D tackle. Now, obviously, if he's not there, we'll see. Now, the Chiefs, coverage-wise, on third down, they play a lot of 2-man coverage. They have the second highest percentage in the NFL behind the Saints. And they predominantly play at a dime. That's what they play on third down, 6 DBs. But they play a lot of 2-man. which is, if you feel you can get to impact the quarterback with 4, 2-man is a great coverage.
Sure.
But that's a big question now. Will Spags feel he can impact the quarterback with 4? He may not.
Yeah, Felix Anudike Uzoma. My apologies.
Yeah.
Should have prepped that one better. It is week 1. We're coming out of the preseason, and that includes us. Bengals at Browns. This is a sneaky, interesting game, and I think it could be a lot closer than people think. Let's talk to Deshaun Watson because it's been a hard discussion for a long time. But let's get into the football of it. His path back to being even good. I mean, he looked pretty solid against the Chiefs in the preseason. A couple of explosive plays out of empty. But, I mean, from what you saw last season and into now, what does that even mean? Like, where is
Yeah, I don't know.
How do they get him back?
All I think we can do is assume that Deshaun Watson is Deshaun Watson. There's no other way. Otherwise, we're just speculating.
Right.
And we're speculating regardless. But let's assume he is what he was or very close to it. Then he's a dual threat, big time quarterback. He can throw from the pocket. He can make plays with his legs, both running and throwing, and he becomes a tough challenge. And obviously the Bengals have had experience with that. They've played Mahomes. They played Josh Allen. They've had experience with guys that can make plays outside the structure of the offense. So this is a really
Lamar Jackson
matchup.
good too.
What's that?
That Lamar Jackson guy's
Yeah. Although that offense was different,
right.
Now it'll be different this year, but I mean, it was a different offense overall. But to me, in some ways, the other side of the ball is really fascinating because of Jim Schwartz and what the new Browns defense will look like. He brought in Jim Washburn as an assistant or consultant. You're going to get the wide 9. That's the reason they went and got Zadarius Smith. Now they have Smith and Myles Garrett, who's, is the best edge pass rusher, among the best. I don't want anybody to get upset, about the Nick Bosa's or others, but he's certainly one of the best. And at 275 pounds, he's an absolute load and he can bend. So you're going to see a different looking defense from the Browns than we saw in previous years. And, we'll see how that plays out. We now have Orlando Brown at left tackle and Jonah Williams at right tackle. And, over the past couple of years, I don't think Williams has been a very consistent pass protector one-on-one. So now he's going to play right tackle.
He's been among the league leaders in total pressures and sacks over the last 2 years. It's been kind of a rough go for him. And Orlando Brown, in my observance, the first half of the arc is fine. The back half, and some really good tackles are like this. Back half of the arc, he's kind of looking for help. That turn, some guys maybe not quite so much.
Yeah. So
the other thing, I mean, getting back to Cleveland's offense, you have Dax Hill and Nick Scott replacing Jesse Bates and Von Bell. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and it could be
for
those who probably aren't familiar, and maybe many listening aren't familiar. Nick Scott actually was a good player last year for the Rams.
Yes,
the Rams did not want to lose him, but that's the way the league works. So Nick Scott was a good signing by the Bengals. Dax Hill, again, for those who don't remember, he was a really, really good prospect coming out of Michigan. He played safety in their base and slot corner in their sub at Michigan, and I actually watched him and thought he had the traits to play outside corner. He's long and he's really, really athletic. Now, again, you're dealing with a first-year starter, second-year player, so we don't know exactly how that works with what he's seeing and how he's going to react. But, he's more athletic than either Jesse Bates or Von Bell, but that doesn't mean at this point he's a better player.
Well, and that's the thing. Uncle Lou asks his safeties to do a lot.
Yeah.
They have to put a lot on their heads because it is that's not an execution-based defense. They do a lot of different things. I mean, you have to execute, obviously, but you know what I mean.
And it's one reason why I think, and not every team believes this, as you well know, it's one reason why linebackers are really important to him. Because they obviously signed Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt. A lot of people thought Jermaine Pratt would be gone, but they did not want to lose him because he's really important to their defense. The two linebackers are the way in which they play defense. As you know, there are some teams that don't believe that. The Eagles, for instance, and obviously they're a great team too. But, Howie Roseman and that group does not believe that linebackers are that important in the overall scheme of things. So they're not going to pay them a lot of money.
Getting to the 49ers at Steelers. So speaking of defensive EPA on-off splits, the 49ers last year with Nick Bosa, -15, which was among the league's best. Without -8. And, you know, I know on-off splits can be weird. And, I mean, that defense was great with or without him. But we've talked about the Niners overload blitzes and kind of how they do things. So kind of a two-parter here. What does that defense look like without Bosa? And getting into the Steve Wilks. And Steve Wilks, I don't think is really like a single tendency guy. Like you can't say, oh, this is a Steve Wilks defense. But let's just assume, okay, Bosa's out. And how does Steve Wilks sort of contend with that?
Yeah, I mean, I just actually finished watching all of their third downs from last year. It took me a while. They're a fascinating defense. First of all, they play a lot of loaded fronts where they line up with three defensive linemen to one side of the center. Very often in that loaded front, they put Warner up on the line of scrimmage as a stand-up three technique opposite the load. So it ends up being a five-man front. And they're a big stunting team on third down, really big stunting team on third down, and multiple stunt concepts. They've got really, you know, obviously it appears Bosa, we still have time for him because it's a Sunday game, but we'll see what happens. But, you know, they have really good players at all three levels. Mm-hmm. I mean, I watched all these third downs, and I knew this before, but when I see them all in a row, Fred Warner is, to me, hands down the best linebacker in the league. Yep. The way he is used and deployed, he's a pass rusher. He's an underneath coverage defender. He can run the seam. He looks like a wide receiver running. He's so good, and he's so smart. He understands route concepts based on splits. And you know, on the back end, they've got Hufanga, who is a really intriguing player. People might have thought when he came out of USC that you couldn't play him at post safety, but when they play cover one, it's Gibson, the other safety, who matches the tight end, and Hufanga plays post safety and doesn't really get burned. You know, you don't, like I said, you don't think of him as that guy, but he doesn't really get burned. And Gibson is a guy, you know, he's one of those guys, Doug, you know, there's a bunch of those kinds of guys in the league at different positions, been in the league a long time. Maybe never a star, although I think one year he did lead the league in interceptions, if memory serves me correctly.
He made one Pro Bowl. Well, I'll tell you this, Greg. He made my top 11 safety list last year.
But he's just one of those really solid football players. And they started to play more man coverage as the year progressed, and they got really solid play from Ward, who's a solid corner. You know, he came over from the Chiefs, and the rookie Lenore from Oregon, who played really well over the last 7-8 weeks. Once he became a starter due to injury, and they were comfortable clearly playing cover one and matching those guys up on the outside on outside the numbers routes where you really don't have safety help.
Now that defense will be going up against a Pittsburgh offense that I know it's the preseason, so we have to do all those disclaimers. Kenny Pickett's rookie season was there was some YOLO and some like late stuff, and like he wasn't quite seeing it. I saw a more comfortable and decisive quarterback in the preseason. How that transfers to the regular season, I have no earthly clue. But the difference was enough for me to want to mention it. I mean, as much as you watched him in the preseason, what are your thoughts about that offense in general?
Yeah, and again, none of us have any idea what happens when it starts Sunday. Yeah. But the year Pickett came out, I thought he was far and away the top quarterback in that draft class. The one thing I did notice watching his preseason throws was I thought the ball came out with a little more juice in the preseason than it did a year ago. Now, is he ever going to have a Matthew Stafford gun? Probably not. But I thought the ball came out with a little more juice. And he is really – he's – to me, and I had so many of these conversations with coaches the year Pickett came out because I kept hearing, well, he's not a wow player. Like there's nothing special about Pickett. And, you know, again – I'm not saying I know more than any coaches, believe me, that's not my point. But I kept thinking, and this is the kind of stuff I do, Doug, you know this, I just think about this all the time, is, you know, what's wow? Is he going to be Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes? Probably not. You know, I think we can say that. But I think that he has the ability to be an efficient executor and ball distributor, and he does have movement ability. Yes. So I think he can be a higher level quarterback, whatever that means. He can run your offense and he can make some plays outside of structure. And I think that's what you want in your quarterback.
Well, I think the more juice, to me, it just seemed like he was seeing things more clearly and he had more confidence in what he was seeing. And to me, that's almost more important. Oh, he put on 15 pounds in the offseason. He went to a jiu-jitsu coach, learned how to fall like Tua did. okay, yeah, maybe you have bigger biceps, but when you're seeing it better, just more easily,
Yeah.
Bart Starr tells the story of his third year with the Packers under Lombardi, where it's like all of a sudden the playbook became 3D. He just saw it differently.
You know,
That's
but it's
and as
funny
far
you
as,
say that, because even last year when he first became a starter, and he had some tougher moments, obviously, in the early part of the season when he started, but he never looked, and this is not an X and O point, this is just watching a guy play. He never looked like he was playing fast or frenetic. Some guys, they go out there and you go, oh my God, that guy's just not seeing it. I mean, everything is just way too, you could just see it in the way they move. Pickett
right.
didn't really look like that. I mean, I'm sure he missed some reads. I'm sure he was late with some throws. I'm sure that he had misreads, the whole deal that young quarterbacks go through. But he just never really looked like he didn't belong. It just looked like it was going to be a process. And it
No,
was a process.
if anything, I would say the thing of Brock Purdy when he became the starter was like, I'd like a little, speed up the clock a little bit, almost
Right,
like
but it didn't look like he didn't belong.
Right. You don't want someone playing frenetically, but just a little bit faster. But
Right.
So
And they've got a lot of, the thing that I'm most intrigued by with the Steelers, and again, week one, it's always hard to speak exactly about matchups, just because you don't know, particularly when there's a new coordinator in San Francisco. We don't know how Steve Wilkes might tweak some things. We don't know that. I'm really interested to see the division of labor in the backfield with the Steelers, just because I think Jaylen Warren clearly gives them more juice. And, again, Najee Harris is a good football player. I'm not saying he's not a good football player, but Warren is a different kind of back.
Yes.
And I think it was evident what he did last year, and even through the preseason, again, for whatever it's worth, but it showed up that he's just a guy that can take it to the house. And, every coach would love that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that Pickett, some people are saying he's not a wow guy, and maybe the Steelers were going for consistency. But when I wrote up Najee Harris coming out of college, one of the things I wrote was he does everything well and nothing spectacularly. He's got like a really high floor on everything, but there's nothing where you go, oh, wow. And Warren had more of those, oh, wow plays. So,
even in college at Oklahoma State.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out. You mentioned Fred Warner. It's funny. Dolphins at Chargers is our next game of discussion. This is a fascinating one for a lot of reasons that you and I discussed on the phone. And when defenses started to take away the middle of the field, started to press the Dolphins receivers a little bit more. And Fred Warner, it was the game before the Dolphins-Chargers game where the whole thing kind of imploded for Miami's offense, where Fred Warner was making plays at the second and third level. And I'm like, linebackers are not supposed to be that just amazingly athletic.
You talking about against Miami?
Yeah.
Yeah, he made one play against Miami that was ridiculous, but it was because he also knew the route concept. It was dagger, which is an inside vertical and an outside dig, and he knew it the second the routes. He probably knew it from the splits of the receivers, and he knocked down a pass on I think it was actually the Sherfield who ran the dig, but it was just an unbelievably ridiculous.
It was about 20 yards back and just deflected it up, and
it was one of those plays. But a year ago, again, you're dealing with the same coaching staffs on the offensive side of the ball for the Dolphins and the defensive side of the ball for the Chargers for the most part. And Tua had his worst game of the year against the Chargers defense last year. It was week 14. Mm-hmm. And, the Chargers did something that a lot of people might have said, well, that's not something you would do when you play Miami. But what they did was that, they had a really defined game plan. The boundary corner, Mike Davis, played press man. Didn't matter whether it was Hill, Waddle, whoever it was. He played press man. They played a high percentage of cover 2 on third down. The coverage behind, they played mostly coverage behind the 4-man D-line pass rush with not many 5-man pressures. And they basically, I'm sure there's more tweaks to it, but I mean, I'm just, without getting into the deep weeds.
Right.
And Davis really was only beaten one time in the game, and it was in the third quarter. He actually fell down, but I think he would have been beaten anyway.
6-yard touchdown to Tyreek Hill, and he fell down.
I think he probably would have been beaten anyway, but he fell down.
It was close.
Yeah.
But he had Michael Davis had 7 press targets in that game. That was the only catch he gave up. And he was on Hill, he was on Waddle, he was on Sherfield, he was on Gesicki for one play in press. And so now we spin that forward, and I don't know what J.C. Jackson's status is. He lost a lot of last season to a knee injury. I don't know if he's ready to go, but you remember this in New England, or at least my concept of it. He was giving up like opponent pass ratings of 40 every year, ridiculous numbers, as just a dead red man press aggressive corner who could, trail you through the whole route. So now if Jackson's healthy or, reasonably so, they have two of those guys. It makes you wonder how they're going to sort of split that up.
Yeah. It'll certainly be interesting. I mean, and I'm real curious. Again, this is something we don't know. And that's why some of these matchups are hard. I'm really curious with what the Chargers offense is going to look like.
My next question is, what are your expectations for Justin Herbert and Kellen Moore's offense? Because we don't need to recite the litany of people bashing Joe Lombardi for the reductive passing game.
Some of that's fair and some of it's not, as is always the case when coaches get bashed. I don't do that. That I don't live in that world because I know how hard coaches work, and I sit and watch tape, and I know there's so many reasons. So I don't go there, but it's obviously going to be a different offense. They've obviously got tremendous size at the wide receiver position. They've got Allen, they've got Williams, they've got Palmer, they've got the rookie. From what I understand, Palmer will be number 3 to start the season, but I'm sure they'll have some specific plays for Johnston, the rookie from TCU, because he's big, he can run a bit. So they'll probably have some, he may not play 50 snaps, but they'll have some specific things for him.
He's got to shore up some ball security issues, but other than that, I'm really curious to see that offense, and against a defense that now it's Vic Fangio, but they don't have Ramsey. So we'll see. I don't know how that's going to look on either side right now, to be honest with you, but I'm really curious to see it. I would say Michael Davis, or Mike, depending on what you want to call him, keep that name in mind if you're watching that game, because it will come up. With Herbert, we can say, I'm without fear of contradiction, as far as tools, top 3 in the league.
Herbert. Yeah, again, that's another thing. I just do my job, Doug. You know that. It's not my job to debate other people. I don't do that. But when I start reading, people are already starting with Herbert. Well, can you win the big one? Come on. The guy is a high level talent. There's a lot of reasons why teams win and lose. What do people want the Chargers to go get a quarterback that's less talented? Is that the plan?
I guess so. John Madden, I believe the Raiders went to 5 straight AFC championship games under John Madden, all losses to the eventual Super Bowl winner. And Madden would say, "Oh, they can't win." Well, tell me when the next big one is, because we won a lot of big ones. But
the guy's a high level talent. He's a really fine NFL quarterback. You have conversations with coaches, and they talk about Justin Herbert in glowing terms. There's nothing wrong with Justin Herbert.
No, you want to see more stuff downfield, more explosiveness. Finishing with, and this could be an explosive matchup, Monday night, Bills at Jets. We all saw the killer fade from Aaron Rodgers to Garrett Wilson in the preseason. We expect more of that. How much of the Jets offense will be what we saw last season in Green Bay? Is it pretty much the Aaron Rodgers offense? And I'm not saying Nathaniel Hackett's not just there to keep the hot drinks hot and the cool drinks cool. They're all working in conjunction with each other. But would you expect to see maybe more downfield stuff, less of an RPO-based thing? Green Bay has things they want. Maybe Aaron does, there was a little bit of back and forth with that a couple of years ago.
That's what's hard.
I know it's speculation.
Yeah, it's speculation. I don't know. They obviously want to run the ball as well. They've got 2 good backs. I don't think ideally they want Rodgers dropping back 45 times unless the game would dictate that. I don't think that's the way they want to play. So he's obviously a big story, deservedly so. I'm not saying it's not big, but I'm not sure they want to play that way. So I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I think we probably have a better feel for the other side of the ball because it's the same coaching staff and the same defense. And, Josh Allen has struggled a bit against that defense. And it's funny. I watched both those games, the Bills O and the Jets D. And sometimes it's hard to figure out why a guy struggles. Like you go, oh my God. Yeah. Like he threw an interception. I think it might've been in the first game to Whitehead, the safety, which was just a terrible interception. And he clearly didn't see him. And, then people use a player like that to say, well, they've got his number. And I think, well, it's a horrible, horrible interception, but he obviously just didn't see him. And yeah, he's got to see him, but it wasn't like the Jets did something so special that you went, wow, they just really took advantage of Josh Allen. But, and let's keep one thing in mind. We don't know how it's going to play out this year. We have no idea what the Jets are going to do defensively. No idea. But a year ago, Sauce Gardner was the left corner and Reed was the right corner. Gardner was not a matchup corner. And it's funny because as soon as the schedule came out, all I read is, here's who Gardner is going to match up to this year. Well, we don't know that. Maybe they'll change. They could. We don't know that. But last year,
no one talks about DJ Reed, and he was great in Seattle.
He was really good.
So good that they don't have to move Sauce around because he's really good.
So he was. And in fact, in one of the games, was it the first game or the second game? The first play of the game, Diggs ran right by Gardner for a 42-yard play. Yeah. I think it might have been the second game. But, overall, the Jets, the Jets to me are not their defensive approach was pretty similar in both games. They emphasize coverage more than pressure. The second game, they maybe rushed 5, just a little higher percentage, but not a high percentage. And they played coverage. They played a lot of man on third down. Bills at times had answers, at times didn't. So, we'll see. I mean, it's that to me is going to be a really interesting side of the ball. The Jets have a good defense.
Yeah, well, Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald, who we've talked about Will McDonald, but at Iowa State, he was like 4-eye a lot of the time, and now he's so Robert Sala was like, yeah, he's 240, he's going to be edge, and he looked really good in the preseason.
Right.
Again, preseason, we know. Yeah. Is there still an element of randomness to Allen's play that gets in his way? And can a more balanced power-based offense? They draft Kincaid. They're going to go more 12 personnel because they didn't do it at all. They got Osiris Torrance in the second round. They got Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. It seems like it's going to be a different offense, maybe more balanced. Maybe that gives Allen a little less of a runway to sort of go YOLO too much.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I think Allen is, and I heard this great statement from a great phrase from someone I respect greatly. He said that Allen is a knockout puncher. Yes. And I think his game does have a certain amount of randomness to it. It's just that he can make special plays. But I would say that he's not necessarily a natural timing and anticipation thrower. I don't think that's the strength of his game.
Never has been.
Sometimes I feel like he drops back and doesn't see exactly what he should see, and then he moves too quickly. But as you and I both know, sometimes when he does that, he makes an unbelievably great play. So I've had this conversation with so many people, Doug, over the years, and I don't think there's an answer. It's probably not a mathematical equation. I'm sure people had the conversation in Seattle with Russell Wilson. How do what's the balance there? How do you deal with it? You probably don't want to tell Josh Allen not to move. But on the other hand, there are times he moves prematurely and disrupts the timing and structure of the play. So how do you deal with that? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a coach, but and there may not be an answer. It may just be what it is. And this is what Josh Allen is. And he's clearly a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And he certainly can make plays that other quarterbacks can't make.
Well, the great improvisers in music, you have to learn the rules before you can break them. I think if you have a quarterback who benefits from breaking the rules to the point where he doesn't have to learn them, you sort of get those little pockets of knowledge in while he's doing all this thermonuclear stuff. And you try and mix it up as best you can. I don't know what else.
Yeah, I would bet it's a very hard.
You're not going to tell Josh Allen, "Hey, be more normal." It's not.
No, and you're not going to certainly tell him, "Hey, Josh, I don't want you to leave the pocket." You're not going to tell him that. But still, on the other hand, Josh, as there are other quarterbacks that move a lot, will often leave the design of the play on the field because they move when they don't have to.
Yes,
and I'm just not sure, how you deal with that. Then they make great, we're going to have the same conversation about Caleb Williams next year when he comes out of USC, who's obviously got special traits.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Greg, we know you have special traits, and we're happy to have the first week preview in the books. And next week we'll have even more to talk about because we will actually see these things in the regular season, and we can then spin them forward. So, as always, great stuff, and we'll talk next week.
Thanks, Doug.